Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. The board wasn't letting us off of the mute mode. Anyway, that's cute. We just sort of sit there. Anyway, welcome. I know. It's like, what are you doing? But anyway, thank you so much for joining us here on the Outer Realm. It is our Thursday night segment. We're broadcasting live on United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3, 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans, fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of the Outer Realm journey since day one. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so much. We could not do it without you. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for his voice and his music, which you just heard on our intro. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, and it can be found anywhere that you can find good music, all your favorite streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, who is the artist behind all of the banners and logos here at the Outer Realm. So big thank you to him as well. So tonight, for the very first time, we are basically welcoming, I'm trying to figure out where I am, Robert Sullivan, and he is going to be discussing his books, which are Symbolism. Sorry, my computer just totally went blank on me. Symbolism 1, 2, and 3. And all those favorite movies that you like to watch. Huh? There's stuff in there. I know that Joe and I did a show on the Gray Zone talking about The Matrix and found all kinds of stuff. I mean, there was a 2-hour show just on The Matrix. And I'm pretty sure Robert will touch on that as well. So lots of really interesting stuff. And we're going to show his book covers here. And we had to book him twice. He's just so versed. There's just so much information. You guys just have to go to his website and check him out. It's just scrolling across the bottom. But we're just going to wait for him to come on. And I mean, I just spent, the afternoon just listening to some of his interviews, and it's very fascinating. I can't wait to see what makes one want to get into all of that, because some of us would be, considered tin hat wearers.
But people wonder that about us, what we do.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Get into understanding it, or get into, I wonder who's putting these symbols up.
Well, the symbolisms is just, it's not what you think. I have to say, I just have to grab something else here. It's actually not what you think. When I started listening to some of it, it reminded me a lot, because I love Jordan Maxwell. I really do. And it's a lot of that sort of stuff. So when I started, really listening to the interview, and I thought to myself, I'm just still fighting with the computer, guys, don't mind me. I thought, oh my God, I've really touched on a lot of this a few years back, but it's so deep, honestly. It can go on and on and on, and it really can go on and on and on. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to come up with all of this, because it's just literally mind-blowing stuff. It takes a lot of research, and to give a brief idea, you have his intro. Can you just go over that?
Yes, I do. I actually just looked at, you booked him again, but the date after. I'll go over it with you after because it's one day off, and I know you're never off. So.
Oh. Okay. Oh.
It's okay. You have the 7 instead of the 6.
Who?
I just want to confirm it.
I just figured.
Robert W. Sullivan IV. I mean, come on, a name like that. Like, seriously, his name is
intellectual.
fancy. Is a Freemason, philosopher, historian, antiquarian, jurist, lay theologian, mystic, radio TV personality, writer, showman, best-selling author, CEO, and a lawyer. Mr. Sullivan joined Amicable-St. John's Lodge, number 25, Baltimore, Maryland, 26 years ago in 1997. He became a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason in 1999, Valley of Baltimore, Orient of Maryland. And he'll explain a little bit about that to us when he comes on.
He's saying he's waiting.
When he's waiting.
He is. Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, good, because I've been ready for like weeks.
Hello. Oh, I love it. See, you're in the moody lighting too.
I know.
We're best friends. We're best friends now.
Welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us. My gosh, what a pleasure.
Well, thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here.
Oh, my goodness. Are you kidding? I've been waiting because I know Mark had messaged me a while back. Oh, you just got to talk to Robert. I'm like, okay. And he started sending me all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I really have to talk to Robert. So Mark is in the house as well. And everybody else is just chiming in. Oh, my goodness. And I didn't really know where to start with you because honestly, it's all impressive, all your books. You know, I just started going through everything and I thought to myself, where the heck do you start? Well, let's just start with easing people into it with, cinema symbolism because, I was just saying to Amelia, anybody, like, if we tried to talk about this, we'd probably end up like, tin hat wearers being accused of wearing the tin hats. So it takes somebody like yourself to come forward and say, okay, no, this is a thing. So what got you, I guess I should go a little bit with humble beginnings. Like what got you involved in this sort of esoteric research?
Well, right. Well, again, thank you for having me on. It started years ago. Really, for me, when I was, it goes all the way back to high school for me, was when, I was born in 1971. So I grew up on Star Wars. And, this is 4, 5, and 6 episodes. And, as a kid, they're just great films. I love them. And it was years later, somewhere in the mid to late 80s, that I discovered that these movies that I, were absolutely formative on my youth, were basically the occult. Were these ancient mythologies just repackaged and rebranded with new character names. And even, this wasn't anything that was conspiratorial at all. George Lucas openly admitted this, that the impetus for Star Wars was this book by an American mythologist named Joseph Campbell, and the book was called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he gets into these archetypal images, these archetypal characters, how they are personifications of the sun, the moon, the planets, and that this great space western was just essentially a retelling of these ancient mythologies. So that's where it kind of all started for me. And then it was really years later. It was funny because it kind of worked in stages, and I'm not sure why this is. When you fast forward ahead then to the late 90s, you really had this rash, and I mean rash, of these decidedly Gnostic films coming out, starting in the late 90s, 1997, I want to say, that go all the way through to about 2001. And this is just where you just had this bombardment of these Gnostic films coming out. I don't know if it was psychological, if it had to do with the turn of the millennium. I kind of presume it did, presume it does. And then you had, sort of right behind that, you had the National Treasure movie come out, the first one by Disney, which kind of was, put out with the Da Vinci Code. I think it's a better movie than the Da Vinci Code, but the one thing that was Yeah, the one thing that was really neat, that was really cool about the National Treasure was it's a Masonic ritual. I mean, I know people see it and there's some Masonic overtones in it, which are easily picked up upon. What a lot of people don't realize is that is actually a high degree Masonic ritual that you are witnessing, really from start to finish.
Everybody's going to go rent that movie now.
Yeah, it's a great film. I always loved it. It was a movie that I actually dissected in my very first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, which was a Masonic book.
Yes.
But that's kind of where it all started. And when you just start when you just start looking at it through the lens, I've been on other shows and I've said this on other shows. I'll say it here is without question, my membership in Freemasonry definitely assisted me in doing this research. But the one thing that I do like about it is, and I think that kind of separates it from some other fields of study, especially when you're dealing with controversial subjects, whether it be UFOs or zoology or ghosts or things like that, is the one thing that does kind of put this outside of that is it's provable. I mean, what I mean by that is you can see it. I mean, I could put a movie on and pause it or whatever, fast forward to a scene and say, okay, here's what's going on here on some sort of esoteric level, or, here's, a symbol or theme or, costuming or music or whatever that has some sort of, hidden meaning. So that for me does kind of make it, worth investigating.
Right. It does run really deep. I mean, I know I did a show just on the Matrix, and you're getting into Gnosticism and Buddhism. I mean, you're going really, really far back, and there was so much involved in symbolism for that film. I can't even imagine how you touched on as many films as you did, because it runs really, really deep, and it's not what people think. I think there's just so much now on the media with, if you see, this symbol or this symbol. I think when you're looking at symbolism to the degree of your research, you're going back to a lot of astrology. You're going back to a lot of like even back in ancient times. It's not what people think it is. In other words, it's not like a Pizzagate thing. I'm going to put it out there because I think people are confusing the two.
No, I tend to agree with that. You certainly have films that have very dark, even what I would call satanic themes to them.
Yes.
That I definitely talk about. But I mean, it's much more than just identifying some symbol hanging in the background and drawing a conclusion off of that. I mean, when these filmmakers, I mean, especially the very adroit ones, go to work, I mean, you have to pay attention. I mean, when I say you, I mean the viewer. I mean, if you're interested in this, I mean, it's the costuming can have meaning, the music can have meaning, the very actors and actresses that are performing can have meaning. And again, you're absolutely right. You're dealing with a lot of very ancient themes, religion, Gnosticism, paganism. The archetypes. Absolutely. Mythology. And I mean, The Matrix is definitely a big film. I mean, that's, one of the granddaddies out there when it comes to Gnosticism, and symbolism and just a lot of hidden meaning and a lot of things going on in it. But no, I mean, I definitely am, of the belief, like what you just said, that it's more than just pointing out a symbol and thinking, oh, this is just some sort of, diabolical theme. I mean, it goes, in my opinion, anyway, it goes much, much more deeper than that.
No, it does. The research is really good. I mean, I think I started getting into it when I started researching or reading Jordan Maxwell's stuff, like way back in the day. Jordan Maxwell, who, rest in peace. But I loved his stuff, and it was an eye opener for me. And I think once you start grasping, what it really is all about, you just start looking for it everywhere. After a while, any film.
Yeah, there are definitely some movies that are more pronounced than others. That's for certain. There are some movies that, will have an archetype or two in it, but by and large are pretty, clean. Doesn't make them a bad movie or anything.
No.
They're still good movies. But I mean, there are some that just, I mean, I'm working on Cinema Symbolism 4 right now, and I mean, there are just some that I'm like laboring through because there are just so many things going on in them, and it's like I said, it's just something that it interests me very much. I love doing it.
Right. Well, do you want to start, talk about some of the different films? Why don't we start with Star Wars? Since
Yeah,
that's your
sure.
favorite.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Okay.
It's sort of like I mean, Star Wars. You can really kind of apply the template, or applies the template that you'll see in movies, and of course, some of this work predates Star Wars. But I mean,
Yes.
again, this is the it's essentially the hero's journey, the archetypal adventure,
Right.
and it's what Campbell talks about is this hero who is plucked from the populace to go on some grand adventure, and ultimately winds up defeating some dark evil overlord. And of course, in its root, this is sort of the Christian story, the Christ story. And you will find parallels all over the place with these figures being Christ-like.
Right.
Whether it be Luke Skywalker or certainly Harry Potter is another one that comes to mind, or the Chronicle of Narnia, or even the Lord of the Rings with Frodo Baggins, and of course Neo Anderson, of course, in The Matrix is one of the best examples, if not the greatest example of the Gnostic Christ ever put on cinema. This would have been a title that would have been held by John Murdoch in Dark City, which came out a year earlier, but Murdoch only holds the title for about a year before he's displaced by Anderson, who probably, like I said, is the greatest example of a Gnostic Christ ever put on film.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's the one thing that's interesting with the monomyth and with this, I guess I should point out that what it ultimately breaks down to is Campbell gets into these component parts that ultimately are constantly sort of reoccurring in mythology. They appear in Star Wars, and you'll find them in these other films as well.
Right.
Like Lord of the Rings and The Matrix. You find the same component parts, and this I kind of took this to another level in Cinema Symbolism 3, which was my last book. I'm even carrying it a little further in Cinema Symbolism 4, where I have a whole chapter. Is what I did was I took each component part and I sort of seeing like, could I find these component parts in movies that didn't necessarily portray the monomyth, but just had, component parts in them? And the answer is yes. I mean, whether it be, the womanist temptress element, or the supernatural aid element, or the threshold guardians, who are always very popular. These are always memorable characters.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at cinema in general, you will find these component parts, not necessarily in order, not necessarily all in one, but I mean, these component parts just span cinema. And it's not, and I'll just point out, I'll end it on this. I mean, it's not just these deep, overbearing adventure movies that have these deep religious themes. I mean, you can find these in comedies, you can find these in romantic movies, in dramas. One of the things that I did was, and I really like doing this, is I thought to myself, well, let me go back in time to 1977 when Star Wars came out. I kind of thought to myself, well, what movie came out that year is sort of like the antithesis of Star Wars? And I ran through it in my head, and I thought, and when I identified the movie, I thought, well, does this movie contain any of the monomyths? And the movie I came up with was Smokey and the Bandit, of all things, with Burt Reynolds. I mean,
I'd never think of that.
And when you look at the two movies, I mean, they have the same, sort of component parts to them. I mean, where you have Darth Vader as sort of the evil father figure, and you have Sheriff Cooper T. Justice. It's the same character almost.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
It is. You will find these elements all over the place, and when you're trained to look for them, they stand out like sore thumbs.
You can say that about Boss Hogg with Dukes of Hazzard, though.
Absolutely.
Oh, crap. I was right. I was thinking out loud.
No, I mean, you will find the ogre father figure, in loads of films. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis, and There Will Be Blood. These elements are really universal, and it just goes to speak to the archetypes and things like that. But no, I mean, one of the things I'm doing in Cinema Symbolism 4 is I took each component, and I thought, okay, here it is in this movie, here it is in this movie, here it is in this. I mean, I could have gone on forever. I mean, theoretically,
Mhm.
I could still be writing on it. But yeah, I mean, when you look at Star Wars and you break it down, yeah, I mean, absolutely, you will find these elements, in TV shows. I stuck to movies, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's universal.
I've
Yeah.
never watched Star Wars, and I think you are the first guest to ever convince me that I need to watch it now. Just because of the perspective and what you found. I'm serious, because for me, I've never had an interest in it. I think I'm the only person on this network that has never seen it. But
Yeah, the I guess the 4, 5, and 6 are the ones that, from the 70s, the early 80s, that are the ones everyone knows. Then of course
Yes.
the prequels, which are okay, and then the last couple ones they did. The first one was the best one, but the last two I thought were really kind of disappointing. But there is a lot of religious symbolism in it. I mean, for instance, and I'll just tie this into
Please.
what I was just talking about. Is like, when you're looking at Star Wars, I mean, it really is sort of the Christ allegory, where you
Mhm.
have Christ personifying the solar hero, the sun God man, defeating the devil, the Prince of Darkness. I mean, and
Mhm.
what do you have in Star Wars? Luke Skywalker. Well, I mean, where does that name come from? Well, the name Luke means lux, light. I mean, what light do you know that walks across the sky each day? The sun. So I mean,
Mhm.
Luke Skywalker is the sun. Well, who is he going up against? The devil, Darth Vader, the dark evil overlord. Uh,
Mhm.
we find this again with Harry Potter.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
the solar figure who's doing battle with the Death Eaters and the dark evil overlord. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah,
Potter, even Potter is killed and resurrected at one point. Where
Right.
have I seen this before? Uh,
Right. Right.
so like I see, you can see what I'm getting at here.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
These are old themes just repackaged and rebranded.
why do you think it just keeps? It's just like a cycle. Like it's why does it keep showing up in films? Like why do they bother? I guess is what I want to know. Like, is this like, can we just not do something different? And I
Hollywood would
hate to
call
put
it a
it that way,
formula.
but really, why is it so important? Why does it just keep resurfacing?
It's just, I think it's just storytelling in nature
Right.
is gonna contain this material no matter which way you cut it. Um,
Right.
in the end of the day, it's really, when you really step back and you break it down, is what's the formation for all this stuff, and it's literally the interaction. It goes way back in time, but it's really the
Yeah.
movement of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars, and
Mhm.
how these bodies were assigned characteristics, anthropomorphized,
Right.
and how they interact with each other. That's the basis of all storytelling. So I mean, you have
Mm.
Luke Skywalker, the sun. Princess Leia is the moon. This is why she wears the white robes.
Right.
The dark evil figure, the nighttime sky.
Right.
Darth Vader.
Right.
And it's really, I mean, this is what the fairy tales are. I mean, the little, it's the same thing with fairy tales. I get asked about these all the time. It's Little Red Riding Hood. She goes into the winter months, the forest, and she's wearing the red cloak of the autumn leaves turning over from autumn, and she gets
Right.
devoured by winter, the werewolf, only to be sprung by the handsome blue-eyed blonde-haired woodsman, spring, the vernal equinox. It's just a retelling of the sun moving from
Right.
autumn, winter, spring. I mean, that's
Mhm.
what a lot of this stuff ultimately boils down to.
Right.
So it's just so archetypal and so ancient that it just constantly keeps reappearing. But the key to it is, I mean, I guess, for me, it's you have these grand, monomythic adventures, but you will find these undercurrents and different, occult undercurrents. It's not the only one. Appearing in different, things. I mean, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings are not the only stories or cinema that features this kind of stuff.
So it's
Right.
not just sci-fi, but we have to make clear
Oh,
as well. Because
oh
I mean,
no,
Dukes of Hazzard is
It's
not sci-fi.
everything.
Yeah.
no. This spans all genres, whether it be comedies, whether it be drama movies. You can even have erotic thrillers. I mean, for example, you take the movie, for instance. Here's one that I talk about in one of the movies was the film from the late '80s, Fatal Attraction.
Mhm.
If you pay attention to that very clearly,
Mhm.
one of the things they do in it that's very unique is the Glenn Close character. This was Alex. She's obviously like a schizoid split personality where she's the good girl, bad girl.
Mhm.
If you watch the movie, she only wears clothing. She either wears white clothing, black clothing, or white and black clothing.
Mhm.
That to denote the good girl, bad girl persona.
Right.
That's a great example of how clothing or costuming is used to
Yeah.
convey something.
I need to reevaluate my closet.
Yeah. So
Mine's all black.
Yeah.
I only wear black, white.
Yeah.
I'm all
So
black.
that's
Yeah.
kind of a great example of just how costuming is used to
Mhm.
convey like a schizoid,
Absolutely.
split black
Right.
white, personality. But like I said, yeah, it spans all genres. It's not just these big space westerns or anything like that.
Yeah, because
Right. Right.
cinema's
Right.
visual. It's not just. It's visual. It's subliminal. You don't even realize what you're watching unless you're doing what you're doing, where you're investigating it and taking notice. Because Hollywood would just call it a formula. I'm going to read Carrie's. Hi, Carrie. Carrie writes, George R.R. Martin brought a lot of esoteric knowledge to younger generations and millions of people via Game of Thrones. I loved seeing my online Game of Thrones fan friends in their discovery.
Yeah. There was quite a bit in there. Jim.
That was a really good series. Jim Gerard. Hi, Jim. Symbols are the visual source codes for communication between worlds.
Oh, that's deep.
He's been a guest.
Dolly.
Dolly. Hi. I like saying hello, Dolly. I was raised in Masonry. My father was a 33rd and an Eastern Star. It has formed me greatly. The symbology in movies alludes to truths that are to be discovered by those seeking truth. What about the symbolism that we're seeing in concerts and musical artists that is all over social media?
I kind of look at that with a sort of a skeptical eye to an extent. I do get into some music videos in my work, but it's again it's not a lot of what people think it is.
No.
So I do touch on it a little bit. It's really not my forte. I don't maintain any social media accounts, so
smart man.
I'm off of that, so I couldn't tell you anything that's happening on social media. But I guess for me, it's going to be probably a bit of a surprising answer. One of the best. It's from the early '90s. One of the best music videos I've ever seen for alchemy, for alchemical transition. The person could go look it up on YouTube. It's by far and away my favorite video for absolute esoteric wisdom, alchemy, the occult. It's Gloria Estefan's "Live for Loving You." If you ask me to nail down the most occult music video I've ever seen, that would be the granddaddy of them all.
Wow. And I would never associate her with any form of occult. I never even thought about nothing from Madonna, like everybody thinks then.
Well, a lot of the stuff with like Prince and Madonna and that's kind of like on its face.
A prayer was definitely in your face.
Right. And that doesn't hold as much interest for me as trying to see the stuff that no one else can see.
Right.
Yes.
So
understood.
Yeah, it's like that's the best way I can describe it. But like I said, if I think I break it down in Cinema Symbolism 2, I give a whole breakdown of the Gloria Estefan video. And like I said, from an alchemical standpoint, that would be the best one I've ever seen.
I agree with you with the musical artists and in your face. Like you often see Beyonce, doing the whole symbolism, and when people, that's what's really floating around on social media. I always say to them, it's a little too in your face, and it's great publicity for her because she gets that stuff generating online. So
Right. Well, that's something. Your point is absolutely well taken, because though I've been on shows and I've talked about this as well, and you kind of have to be a little careful of this, is when this material is used for sensationalism. which it is oft a lot of times. And this is where it's obvious if Beyonce is trying to, a lot of my opinion is a lot of this stuff is badly ill-informed, and it's kind of like a self-licking ice cream cone, as it were. So, for example,
I'm stealing that.
well, like I'll give you
I like that. I like that.
Like, for example, the thing with Beyonce is people believe, I mean, she flashes the triangle and puts her eye behind it and see the eye in the triangle.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're familiar, and this is supposed to, of course, be the Illuminati or something like that. Of course, if you do legitimate research into this, that symbol has nothing really to do with the Illuminati at all.
No, I think people are reaching.
Right. It's sensationalism. It's things like that. And I do talk about it in my books just for the point of separating it out, kind of what I would call as like sort of junk food, as it were. It's not really, I mean, you're not going to find this stuff in a Darren Aronofsky movie or Stanley Kubrick.
But when you see the Pope do it,
they're much clever.
Oh, like Eyes Wide Shut had all kinds of stuff in there. Holy crap.
Yeah. Oh, Eyes Wide Shut's a great one.
Yeah.
What I really like about, I mean, Kubrick is one of those grand masters, and what I really like about the movies of Kubrick is, and this is like one of the hallmarks of the real expert, is he uses symbolism and the occult and themes, but he knows when to use it and when not to use it, and he knows when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, so he changes it. And Aronofsky does the same thing, and people like Ari Aster do the same thing, and that's what I really like to see is, that to me is like, John Carpenter's another one.
Yeah, they really make you think.
They know when to use it, but they know also when not to use it, or when it's not contextually appropriate.
There's nothing.
And that's something, I'll just end on this real fast, is that's something that is absolutely critical to this research, and something that I'm constantly stressing, and I'll just leave it at this, is context. You constantly have to keep an eye out for how the context of how this material is presented. And what I mean by that is, and this is the lawyer in me speaking, is a symbol or a theme used one way is not necessarily universal. It could mean something completely different used in a different way. And the way you can only determine that is by looking at the surrounding circumstances. So that's something else to keep an eye out for.
Well, it's like, I don't want to say the symbolism because I don't want to bring it up, but in generalization, we know what happened with the, in Germany. That was a stolen symbol. That wasn't his. But now look at what it means and what it means to people, just by the way they used it. They changed the meaning.
Yeah, the swastika is one of the oldest symbols of all. It denotes the sun in motion. It's the sun moving across the sky. Usually it's the reverse. You see it going the other way. Hitler switched it around and reversed it. I mean, you're absolutely correct. It's the idea of an appropriated symbol that didn't start out meaning what it all means today. But of course, you show that to anyone today, they're going to go right back to Nazi Germany, no doubt about it.
Yeah, just like the Illuminati symbols. I always laugh when one of my friends says, "Oh, I saw Beyonce doing, or I saw Jay-Z doing, and I saw this." And I go, "Listen, the Illuminati are not in a concert doing this. Okay, like this is not secret societies are secret for a reason."
Yeah, well, stuff what you're describing right there, that would be, in my opinion, being done for sensationalist purposes.
Absolutely.
And I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it doesn't, I'm not stressing out over it or anything. But for me personally, that's really not what my research is about.
No. I just find it amusing. I'm glad that you answered that, because for all of my friends who are listening and watching, that I've had to explain that 100 times. Anyways, let's get into the real stuff.
Where do you think, I mean, I know all these are ancient symbols. They go way back. I mean, way back, ancient cultures and so on. But where do you think, like, what was the film where do you think this really started?
Oh, well, I can let me say it to you. Let me answer the question this way.
Okay.
Rather than saying the film and where it started is, the way I would answer that question is by saying this is nothing new.
Yeah.
This material predates Hollywood.
Yeah.
I can trace it back to the writers in the 19th century, people like Edgar Allan Poe. You'll find it with Herman Melville. You'll find it with Emily Dickinson.
Yeah.
You'll find it with Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Veiled allegory. You will find this in the works of people like Richard Wagner in Mozart. And then when you really, if you really come to understand it, what I would call the pop culture warfare, where you sort of have two competing factions against one another. I can trace it back to Elizabethan England. If it exists before that, I'd have to do some more research. But in Elizabethan England, you clearly have the works of Marlowe, who is doing the bidding of the Counter-Reformation and the Jesuits. And then you have him being counteracted by Sir Francis Bacon, aka William Shakespeare, who is promoting good Queen Bess and Elizabethan values and the Hermeticism surrounding the Elizabethan court. So you can definitely see it, this pop culture warfare going on, where you have Marlowe on one side and Shakespeare on the other, just battling it out in their plays, trying to propagandize the people one way or the other.
Hamlet.
That's where I would say this all kind of starts. It might predate that, but I'd have to do some more research. But that's where it begins. And like I said, you could trace it all the way up through Mozart, Amadeus, Shakespeare, or Wagner, and you get into the 19th century guys like Edgar Allan Poe, and then you get into Hollywood. And when you get into modern motion pictures, I mean, you can look at it, from the very beginning. I mean, you look at a movie like Metropolis, Fritz Lang, and I mean, that thing is just overloaded with all sorts of Gnostic themes and religious themes, religious allegories. And again, it's right there at the beginning, with Hollywood, and it's continues on to this day. And when you look at Hollywood and the movies they make, I mean, there's really no era, I would say, that's free from this. I mean, you can find it in the 40s, you could find it in the 50s, 60s, you can find it in the movies of James Bond, you can find it in science fiction, romance. I mean, you get stuff in the 40s, movies like Gaslight. I mean, here we have Hollywood, creating a word in our vocabulary. And that's another thing I point out is, we talk about, how these ancient religions and these archetypes, how Hollywood is using them. Hollywood is a powerful medium, as you pointed out. It's probably one of the most potent forms of media ever invented. And as such, they create archetypes. For instance, I mean, ask any adult, certainly Generation X or over, to talk like a vampire. I mean, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to try to imitate Bela Lugosi's Hungarian accent from Dracula. So, I mean, here's an example of Hollywood creating an archetype. So,
Right. As
Dolly says there is a connection between 20th century Fox. They bought many Masonic temples that became movie houses.
Yeah, well, I know. I talk about this in the one. I know the I can't remember, but I know the old Hollywood, the Masonic Temple in Los Angeles that was the one to all the actors, I think is where they filmed Jimmy Kimmel Live now. I get into that in one of the books. But yeah, I mean, the Freemasons essentially founded all the Hollywood studios. I talk about that in one of the books. I mean, Jack Warner or the Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The only one who actually, believe it or not, is who wasn't a Mason was Walt Disney. He was in something known as D Molay, which is the Masonic Boy Scouts, but he was never a Freemason. But all the major Hollywood studios were founded by Masons. I get into that in one of the books, but Masonry and Hollywood has always walked hand in hand. So I guess it's probably maybe one of the reasons why you'll find all these hidden themes in films. It's certainly a possible explanation.
I mean, Wizard of Oz is a big one.
Wizard of Oz, yeah.
Wizard of Oz. Yeah, that was a big one.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, The Wizard of Oz is this was a movie that I tackled in the first book. The Wizard of Oz is always a favorite of mine because it's so multi-layered. It was written by L. Frank Baum, who was in Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement, and you have really anytime you have a movie that is multi-layered, that is operating on multiple levels, that's always something that I really like to dissect, and that's something that you will find in The Wizard of Oz. So, for example, well, let me just say this is a movie I've broken down 1,000 times on podcasts. But on the one hand, you have just the movie on its surface, where you have, or the story on its surface, where it's just about this girl, this farm girl going to this magical land, having an adventure, going home, game over, have a nice day. But then you get into the second layer, which is the one a lot of people are familiar with, which is the political allegory, where this thing is a whole retelling of the American socio-political economic scene of the late 19th century, where the Wizard of Oz is William McKinley, the Yellow Brick Road is the gold standard, the Silver Slippers are the free silver movement, Tin Man is the American laborer, Scarecrow the American farmer, yada yada yada. I've talked about that. But then you get into the third level, which is really kind of the occult level, which is, it's this Gnostic awakening where Dorothy goes to this magical land, has this very, adventure with these three figures, these three characters. This is all coming out of the world of theosophy. Blavatsky wrote that in order to receive gnosis, you have to have intelligence, fortitude, and courage. This is why the three travelers are seeking a brain, a heart, and, courage. And she gets to the wizard, which is the demiurge, the false messiah, and she of course winds up having her Gnostic epiphany, which is for Dorothy. There's no place like home. So it's this great Gnostic adventure where she comes to know herself, which was the sort of the mantra of the ancient mystery religions. If you ever watched the Matrix movie, this is the mantra that's hanging on the wall behind the oracle when Neo sees or go know thyself. And of course, this is what Dorothy Gale winds up doing in The Wizard of Oz. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland is essentially the same story, only the little girl goes underground in that one. And if you really come to understand this material, the movie that came out a few years ago, Ari Aster's Midsommar, is a complete retelling of The Wizard of Oz, only much more macabre. So that's a fantastic movie also.
So
very, very good stuff. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Ari Aster. He had two movies out. One is both are very demonic. One is about demonic possession called Hereditary. Great film.
I've seen that.
Yeah. Midsommar is incredibly morbid. Very good
excellent
movie.
Film.
And then he has a new one out, which I've yet to see, called Beau is Afraid. But looking at what I know about Aster and seeing the little bit I've seen in Beau is Afraid, Midsommar draws a lot on The Wizard of Oz. And on the little bit I've seen on Beau is Afraid, some of the trailers, I'm also seeing this Wizard of Oz vibe being thrown out. So I haven't seen it yet, but I look forward to seeing it.
I gotta see that. When I was a kid, Wizard of Oz for me was like a horror film as a kid.
Yeah, I've heard that before, that it can be scary. I always remember watching it on TV, and it definitely has. If you're a kid and when Margaret Hamilton appears on screen, that'll scare the hell out of you.
It did. Yeah.
She is very, very in her element. It looks like in playing the Wicked Witch in the West. You do find that with actors. Sort of actors who are born to play the roles that they wound up with. Certainly you think of, Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch, Lugosi as Dracula, Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes, Gloria Swanson as Norma Desmond, of course, Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, Clark Gable as Rhett Butler. These are roles that you could not possibly imagine, almost another actor playing. When Hamilton, appears on screen, and whenever she's on screen as the Wicked Witch, with the flying monkeys and the trees throwing, it's scary stuff. It's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You make some references to 9/11. Do you believe that some of the symbolism, sorry, I'm a little bit tongue-tied today, leads to, it sounds like an episode of The Simpsons almost, like they lead to these premonitions somehow, like it's just all thought through or thought out.
This this is by far and away one of the most interesting subjects that I've ever tackled, and it is the idea of movies as prophecy, and movies containing featuring these elements that seem to be predicting real life events within a very short time period. And 9/11 is only one of them.
Yeah.
You can go back in time to the 3 Mile Island meltdown. The China syndrome had come out, I think, 2 weeks earlier, and the 9/11 stuff is by far and away the creepiest and most disturbing that I've ever seen. And there's several reasons for that. And it's because when you could start seeing 9/11 imagery in films, 20, 30 years, even 40 years earlier. Granted, it's too far removed, but when you start getting close to the main event, you will definitely start noticing 9/11 imagery or references at a disturbingly alarming rate. And they're there. There's no question about it. And then it becomes the issue of how is it appearing in film, and why is it appearing in film? And to answer that, this is something I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something I'm actually writing a whole chapter on in my next book. It's actually the first chapter of the book. It's actually completed. And I do all the 9/11 stuff, and I've come up with essentially 3 explanations. It's the best I can do. Maybe there's a fourth, or there is a fourth, and there's actually a fifth, but I kind of discarded those. One of them is it's a total coincidence, which I don't buy into.
I don't.
And you're kind of left with these, one of 3, or maybe a synthesis of all 3, where you're dealing with, these are being planted in movies by some sort of, government agency for some sort of nefarious purpose. You would think the CIA or the FBI. That's one explanation. But then the other 2 really come out of the world of the supernatural, and you have to. I get into it in the book. I'm not going to get into it too in detail tonight, because I could spend hours talking about it. You're into the works of people like Carl Jung and Emanuel Schwettenborg, who get into these ideas, these very arcane subject matters of what are called meaningful coincidences. You're dealing with the realm of the collective unconscious, and synchronicity, where these films seem to be synchronizing with these real life events. It's something that I delve into in the 4th book, and like I said, it's going to be the first chapter. But the one thing I will say about it is it's without question there, and it then becomes the question of how is it getting in there. And like I said, there is multiple explanations for it. Certainly a person can believe one thing or not believe another. What I try to do is lay out all 3, or lay out the best possible explanations, and then let the reader decide. But no, the 9/11 phenomenon is, very, very, very eerie. I can run you off some examples if you want.
Yeah. Go. We have lots of time. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, you get into, I guess the granddaddy of them all is the one in the Matrix, where Neo Anderson's passport expires on 9/11/01. It's the exact date. And of course, from an esoteric standpoint, or from a hermetic standpoint, you can look at it as the end of an old age and the dawning of a new one. Right. Pisces to Aquarius or something like that.
Right.
If you look at, there's another thing in there that's interesting. If you look at Neo's passport, you have kind of a reversal, a duality almost, which comes out of the world of Gnosticism, where if you pay attention to Neo's passport, I believe he's born somewhere around September 13th, 1971. It's around that date. I'd have to go look it up. But when you look up that date, that's the date of the New York State prison riot in Attica. And of course, the implication is this is the prison riot where the prisoners rose up and were suppressed by the authorities. And of course, Neo is the prisoner who is going to wake everyone up to overthrow the authorities. So you have this sort of reversal going on there. I thought that was very clever of the filmmakers. So you have that one. And then, of course, right behind that, you have Fight Club. How can you leave that one out?
Right.
Where Tyler Durden, refers to the collapsing buildings at the end of the Ground Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you have in that also the destruction of the artwork, the giant corporate piece of art that clearly resembles the Saphir at the World Trade Center, which of course was badly damaged in 9/11. Of course, they wound up destroying it
Right.
in Fight Club. And then, of course, if you want to go back in time a little further, you have Escape from New York, where the hijackers take control of Air Force One and fly it into Lower Manhattan.
Yes.
That's a unique one because you have the woman who's the hijacker in that broadcasting over the airwaves. And of course, this reflects Mohammed Atta and Zaid Jarrah on the two flights broadcasting also from their flights. There's some very clever ones hidden. If you want to go back to, you really want to go back in time, you can go back to James Bond, Thunderball and Live and Let Die, or excuse me, it's Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, where at the Spectre meetings, Blofeld winds up eliminating agents 9 and 11. That's kind of interesting.
Very good.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a little too far removed, but still a fun one.
It's still,
Yeah, there's a lot in that series.
If you could categorize a 9/11 symbolism as fun, I guess that would be it. But yeah, I mean, and then you get into, you mentioned The Simpsons, of course. You have the one there, which is, I believe, Homer Simpson versus New York City, which is another one where Bart waves the money in front of it. Then you have in 2000, you have The Patriot with Mel Gibson, where at the beginning of the movie he's making the chair, and he weighs it, and it weighs 9 pounds 11 ounces, and then he sits in it and it comes crashing down. I thought that was a good one. And the one thing that makes this particularly eerie is that if you look at it, there is almost like a countdown with this when you start lining up the dates. I mean, of course, you had 9/11/01. And then you had the Simpsons episode, which I think came out like on September 10th of like 97. I want to say maybe 96.
Right.
And then the Fight Club, which came out on like September 9th of like 99. I mean, it's like they're synchronizing almost with the dates. And then you have the movie Seven with Morgan Freeman.
Oh God, that was amazing. Yeah.
The timer on the thing ticks off 9/11. And of course, the movie was named Seven. And of course, you had, Building 7 collapsed, Flight 77,
Right.
All the deadly sins.
Yeah, and then that's a whole nother subject matter. Is when you get into the world of the occult and the flight numbers, and the numerology with it is really astounding. With it, you had flight, what is it? Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, which is 77 feet tall. Just weird things.
The numbers.
Yeah, the numbers. I mean, that's another thing that I get into in the book. I couldn't resist. I get into the numbers with it. So yeah, I mean, it's just a lot going on with that. And like I said, if you're interested in that subject matter, you're definitely going to want to check out the book that I'm writing right now, which is CS4. To be honest, that's probably at least another year or two off. But I am doing a whole chapter.
I'll wait.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, I'll come back on and
absolutely.
If you're
you definitely have an open door invitation. Absolutely. I find that I mean, when you're going that far back to try to, like, The Simpsons seems to be something that's really notorious for this. I mean, how far back do they go? And I see stuff come up pretty regularly. Oh, Simpsons called it. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, are they purposely, do you think, trying to? I mean, was it a social experiment? I guess.
Well, like I said, I can't answer that question because
curiosity.
Well, I mean, the reason I say I can't answer it is because I can only put. I mean, I agree with you with 100% that it's happening.
Yeah.
Then you have to delve into, well, how is it happening? By what mechanism? And like I said, I've kind of narrowed it down to these 3 explanations where you can look at it that's intentional, or you can look at it that it's coming out of the world of the supernatural. Which, in my opinion, personally, me speaking, and again, this is just Robert Sullivan speaking, I think the world of the supernatural to me is a little more interesting. But if a person wants to believe that this is some vast conspiracy, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea of putting this stuff in films for, intentionally does exist. I'm not going to I'm not naive. I'm not going to say it doesn't. I mean,
How just having somebody that's trying to maybe warn,
well, like
warn
for
us all.
example, I
Like
mean,
a time traveler?
I mean, I'll go way back in time. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, if you go back to watch to the 1940s with the Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce, Sherlock Holmes movies, the first couple, the 20th Century Fox ones aside, the first ones put out by Universal are Allied propaganda. I mean, they are total propaganda movies designed to whip up support for the Allied powers. That's nothing new. I mean, and that is, I'm not saying anything conspiratorial. I mean, that's clearly what they are doing. So, I mean, the use of media, by the government or whatever to promote a narrative, I mean, has happened. So I'm not going to say, oh, that's far fetched or anything like that. It's not. I mean, you could sit here and say, look, maybe the CIA or the FBI was planning 9/11 or let it happen, and was tipping off Hollywood to put this stuff in. I mean, is that possible? Yeah, sure it is. I mean, I'm not going to say it isn't. I mean, there's.
I just don't believe in coincidence. That's the thing. I'm just funny with that. Yeah.
Me neither. I mean, and like I said, it's definitely happening. I mean, there was. I mean, when it comes to 9/11, I mean, there's just recently been some very disturbing revelations with this. That two of the hijackers on Flight 77 were CIA assets. I forget their names. I'd have to go look it up, but it's now come to light that two of the hijackers on Flight 77 were actually CIA assets. And when they entered the United States in January of 2000, standard operating procedures were that the CIA was supposed to tip off the FBI that these guys were in the country, and the CIA never did it. So
that's automatic red flag. When you walk through the airport, the facial recognition is supposed to send that through as well.
Well, I mean, you could craft whatever argument you want about it, but I mean, it definitely is suspicious. And then there was a TV show that aired on Fox that was about this fifth flight that was supposed to that they think was another flight that was taking off from JFK. Or it was JFK Airport. When they had the suspicious Muslims sitting in the front, in the first class sections. The plane never got off the ground because by the time it was about to take off, the other buildings had been hit and they grounded the flight. But the pilot had said something very, very disturbing in this. He said he mentioned this. He said when we had to taxi back to the gate, he said it's standard operating procedure that when a flight is grounded for whatever reason, he said, I'm the captain. He said, and I have to go around through the purser who is with the purser who has, I believe, is like, the number one, the main stewardess in charge, to make sure that the aircraft is empty. He said, we cannot lock the door on that aircraft until we know with 100% certainty that there is no human being or animal inside that plane. He said, we got to go into the bathrooms. We got to walk up and down the aisle, make sure the plane is empty. So we did that. He said there was no one in that aircraft. I think it was flight 23. I think it was out of JFK. He said, he said, I'm standing in the waiting room looking out at my aircraft. He said, and all of a sudden I see two men walking back in the aisles, back and forth. He said, I can see him through the window. He said, there's two men in jumpsuits going through my aircraft, going into the back. He said, I don't know what they were doing. He said, I don't know how they got in. He said, about 3 days later, I got back in the aircraft. He said, I know how they got in. He said, they got in through the underneath wheel. He said, they popped up.
And they can do that while you're on the tarmac because it's so much space.
Exactly. And he said, I found out, he said, through another pilot, he said, you weren't aware of this. He said, it was another flight that had one call letter off from yours. He said, they had guys come in. He said they came in, he said, and in the seat backs there were box cutters. He said, and they took box cutters out of my aircraft. And the captain said, he said, that flight was not one number off from mine. He said, the point he was making was, he said, those box cutters that were on those planes that day were planted there. He said, they were on those planes waiting for those terrorists to get on there. So who could have done that?
Inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
There's other places to hide as well, like where on the long overseas flights, where they have, the quarters for the staff to sleep. There's a lot of places you can hide. People don't think about the tire wheel of the plane. It is massive. That opening is huge. And you come right in and you're right in cargo.
Yeah, well, the point was, though, that this guy was removed. These people were looking for box cutters to remove. Yeah, I mean, and that's,
because
that
they
was
knew.
very disturbing.
Yeah, I could talk about that for like days. I find it so interesting on how many places, how many different stops were missed. But that's another show. That's a whole other conversation.
That's a big one. It's definitely something, like I said, I don't believe in coincidence. I think, like Amelia made a good point, it makes you wonder, people going way back, like you say, back to the 40s and 50s, and they're talking about, all these little synchronicities and all this little numerology, 9/11, this and that. I don't know. Let's go to sci-fi. Time traveler.
I'll just end it on this with 9/11, and you talk about coincidences and this, that, and the other. I mean, I'll just leave it at this, and people may remember this or remember this not. I mean, and people are like, people say, oh well, these planes were hijacked and no one knew, and certainly they were running this, and this could have been intentional. They were actually running a war game that morning called Vigilant Guardian, where I believe planes were being hijacked and being flown into buildings virtually. So when this was all happening, they didn't know if this was real life or not. But I mean, I'll just say this. If you go back in time to 1999, there was a golfer named Payne Stewart, whose little Cessna jet, I think it decompressed and it went off course. And when it went off course, this was just, like I said, a little, Cessna. Within like 3-4 minutes, it was surrounded by F-16s. Because it was a flight off course, and they weren't going, and it ultimately crashed. I mean, so you have four jumbo jets going off course, and nothing happens. I mean, coincidence? You tell me.
That's a huge question, JFK and Pennsylvania. You have to ask yourself, what the F? Where were they? That's a really good point.
Absolutely. And the thing with Payne Stewart, no one remembers that. I do, but I remember when that plane,
you brought it up.
Yeah, when that plane went off course, I mean, they had all sorts of red buzzers going off because it was a legitimate plane off course. But the theory is that that these planes, they knew that these were going to be hijacked and they were told to stand down. I mean, that's certainly a possibility.
And anything over the airspace of the Pentagon or the White House they're always on high alert. So there's a lot of questions on that.
Yeah,
I wonder how many people were involved in that.
I mean, then when you look at it in and I mean, you guys know this. I mean, when you look at Building 7 when it came down, I mean, without question. I mean, look, I'm not an expert, but I mean, that building is brought down in a controlled demolition. I mean, I don't need to be,
That's what Chris was saying.
Is that the one where the FBI files?
Yeah, it was the one that came down later in the day.
Yeah, 3 blocks away.
I mean, when you look at it, I mean, you can see the crimp in the building. I mean, you can see it. I mean, it completely comes down on itself.
I've been there. Yeah.
I mean, it's without question brought down in a controlled demolition. And what's funny about that is, I mean, it's not funny, but people ask the question, well, let's just say these buildings had the load bearing members were rigged with thermite charges, to collapse these buildings, to blow them up after the. Once the planes hit, the buildings may not have collapsed, but they had to bring them down in some controlled demolition. Well, I mean, if you're going to go down that path, then you got to go down. Well, how did they get these, explosives into the building? To
that
wire
takes
them?
Years.
Well, believe it or not, starting in January of 2021, a phantom company named Ace Elevator Company came in. No one knows who these guys were, and they had total access to the cores of the building.
Painters too.
Yeah, and they think that Ace Elevator was some sort of CIA spook company, or something, because they've never heard from again. And this is something I talk about in one of the books. I think it was CS.
Is it true that later they found the explosive on the metal?
I'd have to go. I'd have to go look at it.
That's an interesting one.
But I mean, if you look at it. There was an aircraft that hit the Empire State Building back in the 1940s. A big aircraft. Then it collapsed the building. So, I mean, it begs the question that certainly, explosives could have been planted in that those buildings to help bring them down. And clearly, without question, Building 7 later in the day was without a doubt brought down in a controlled demolition.
Mm-hmm.
What Dolly's talking about happened in 93
Mm-hmm.
when they bombed it. But I'm curious, do you believe in time travelers?
Do I personally?
Yeah.
I guess it's possible.
Makes you wonder about those premonitions going back 50 years before it happened.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that this stuff is manifesting in film because of time travel. I wouldn't think of that. That would be really hard to that would be too circuitous to.
Yeah, it's out there for sure, but
I would definitely. I mean, if you want, my opinion is, if you want to look at how this stuff is appearing in film, you're really down to two explanations. It's or a combination of the two. It's intentional, which it can be sometimes, or somehow supernatural. That's to me is the two best explanations to it. Time travel certainly could be possible, but
it's
I have no
high
way
strangeness, right?
Yeah,
it's high strangeness because it could be multidimensional, right? We don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting into the realm of time travel, then you run into all sorts of problems with it regarding paradoxes and things like that. Where like theoretically, if I went back in time, I could talk to myself. But
yeah, I'm not into.
There's a story that with George Lucas, though. George Lucas, it was believed that George Lucas somehow, what is that story? I remember reading it, went back in time to give himself the script to Star Wars. This was some big thing that was going around.
I want to go back in time and somebody tell me about Microsoft.
Yeah, he went and gave his younger self the script and said, "This is going to be huge, and write it, do it, film it." So that's this. I thought, wow, that's
actually the plot of Back to the Future 2.
Right?
Yeah, maybe we're living in some sort of like George Lucas alternative dimension.
I know, but this
and Gene Roddenberry, you just never know.
It's out there. Yeah,
between the two of them.
I just remember seeing it going, oh, come on, that cannot be a thing. Just totally did it, Now, do you have any other research that shows something similar to the 9/11, where there's other like a premonition sort of thing?
Oh, sure. Like I said, you can look at the China syndrome, which was which came about 2 weeks before 3 Mile Island happened. That's pretty strange. I'd have to go look. But I know there are other examples of it. I'm just drawing a bit of a blank right now.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, but there are other examples of it.
Right. And kids movies, because I noticed in the cover of one of your books, you've got. I'd like to bring them up as well, to bring up the books just to show people. But the Beauty and the Beast, I think, comes up in one. Hold on, that's the wrong one.
Yeah, well, again, this is whether you're dealing with the Brothers Grimm or Perrault or any of those characters, when you're dealing with the Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, Snow White, it's the same story all over again. It's this retelling of the sun, the winter months, the moon,
Frozen,
things of that nature.
Share them up.
I get asked about them all the time, and I have broken down all the fairy tales
nice cover
in the book. So yeah, I mean fairy tales are again a retelling of just ancient mythologies.
I loved your cover. I'm like I have a thing for book covers because I have to own books. I can't buy digital. I love the smell. I'm old school, but that is a gorgeous cover.
Yes,
thank you. I design all my own book covers. So
beautiful. That's something you should order if you're listening or watching, and put that on your coffee table because that is a conversation starter. Okay. My gosh, can you imagine?
I'm going to go look for one of the other ones.
Well, I'm going to buy it because I buy while I'm on the show. I'm buying books.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up the other one just because I want people to see them. And all your books can be found on your website on Amazon.
Oh, excellent.
Well, yeah, if you want to purchase them, they're on all the major online retailers. My website will direct you to them. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't personally sell the books.
Right. Okay.
But the Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, and yes, you can get the print edition
Beautiful.
or the ebook, no problem.
Fantastic. I love this
Oh.
cover as well. I love it. I love
Even
it.
if you just collect books, those books are beautiful.
All right, we're gonna go grab the other one.
How long did it take you to write the 3?
Well, let's see, a couple years, 6, 7, 8 years, I want to say.
Wow,
Well,
really?
That's
actually-
more than a couple, Robert.
Well, I'm actually
That's almost a
doing.
decade.
I'm actually doing right now. Yeah, there's part 3. That's
Beautiful.
that's probably the best one of the series. At least I think so. Right now, I'm actually working on Symbolism 4, and I'm actually going to do a 3rd edition of the Royal Arch of Enoch, because when I did the Royal Arch of Enoch, that's my Masonic book. When I did that originally,
that's the next show.
there was some material that I had pulled out because I was going to write another book on it, but that kind of turned out to be not really a good idea. So I'm going to put that material back in. So I'm going to do a 3rd edition of Royal Arch, and I'm also going to do newer, more modern editions of Symbolism 1 and Symbolism 2. There's some things that need a little tweaking in them. And so there will be some new editions coming of those, but they're still probably about 4 or 5 years away right now. The ones I'm working on right now are Symbolism 4 and the Royal Arch of Enoch. They're probably like 2 years away.
Authors always have their favorite book. Anytime you ask them, they always have a favorite book that they've written.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I like all of mine. I like all of mine because they're all different. I think the Masonic book is completely different than the movie books. Although the Masonic book is does have some movies in it that the last chapter that I did in Royal Arch delves into some Masonic movies, and then I did a work of fiction called A Pact with the Devil that I really had a lot of fun with writing, and I just did a revised edition of that, where I actually painted the cover myself, which was
Wow.
pretty intense. I used to be able to paint really pretty well, but my eyesight isn't what it used to be, and I had a little more difficulty than I anticipated. But I love doing that as well, and I'm going to do. My plan is to get the Royal Arch 3rd edition out and to get a couple new volumes of Symbolism 1 and 2 out, and then get Symbolism 4 out. I don't know if there'll be a CS5, but then I want to do some more fiction because I did like writing it. It is a little more different. It is difficult. People think that writing nonfiction, with all the footnoting and all that, is difficult, and it is. It can be very tedious, and especially when you're dealing with movies where you have to rewatch them over and over again. And they can be very nuanced. I mean, the slightest little tweak here or there can change the whole thing. But the problem with writing fiction is, you have to be just as alert because you can always, leave like a plot hole or a loophole. And inevitably in fiction, they're almost impossible to close all of them. I guess the very nature of them being fiction, being made up. But you do have to be careful of continuity and keeping it linear. And it can be very easy to kind of diverge off and maybe do something that's kind of interesting, but maybe it runs a little contrary to something that happened five chapters earlier. So you have to be a little careful of that.
You have to rein yourself in.
You're constantly with fiction. I found myself constantly going backwards. Like making sure everything tallied up. I didn't want to, kind of, make sure all the characters sort of stayed who they were, and make sure everything kind of stayed linear. It's difficult, I guess, maybe for another reason. But no, I like all my books. I like to think that they're all different. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Fiction. Yeah, that's you can get away with doing just about anything. People would probably look at these and say, well, that might be something that was. I don't think a lot of people can get their head around some of this stuff.
The symbolism.
Yeah.
You have to look at it like a crime scene. You can't miss anything, and you have to keep looking.
No.
Yeah, there are without question certain movies out there that it is that every time I watch it, I mean, I've seen the movie 100 times,
Yeah.
or a lot, but it's like every time I watch it new, I always pick up on something that I missed before.
Mhm.
They're rare, but there are a couple movies out there that it's like, all right, if I watch this again, I'm sure I'm going to see something else that I missed before. So.
Yeah. Do you ever watch a film where you really can't make any connections?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are some.
Godfather.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, Godfathers. Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing.
I mean, there's really not much there. I mean, you get some archetypes, but not worth talking about. I like the
No.
movie. I like the last Top Gun movie, Maverick. I thought that was very well done, but
Mhm.
really nothing.
Better than his first.
Yeah, nothing really to delve into. I like Quentin Tarantino. I like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, but I didn't think there was anything worth talking about in any.
Not
of
even
those.
in Pulp Fiction.
No.
No.
I didn't think so at any rate. I mean, I've seen them a dozen times. I mean, maybe there's some little, I mean, there's some fan theories you could put forth, but I don't really, well, I said I don't really. I delved into them once or twice, but I've done fan theories in movies that are overloaded with esoteric themes and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like maybe like an alternative explanation. I mean, like for example, what I'm talking about is like with Pulp Fiction. Like, I mean, what's in Ving Rhames' briefcase? I don't know, but it's open to a million interpretations. Stuff like that, I kind of leave alone. But no, I mean, those movies are all very good.
Mhm.
But just because a movie is devoid, it doesn't have anything going on, and it doesn't necessarily make it a bad movie. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
I think the ones where you find the symbolism, for me, because I only come to this realization now because you mentioned it, how often you can watch it and it feels new every time. Like National Treasure. I can watch that film like once a week and see it in a different light without even realizing that was why. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's very
absolutely. And some movies I need to watch more than once to pick up on, and some just scream off the screen,
Yeah.
jump off the screen to me.
Yeah, like Devil's Advocate screams, Omen yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the one that really, I mean, and this one I'm just laboring over right now because I mean it's one of these ones where it's like every scene has something going on in it. It was the last Halloween movie, Halloween Ends.
I was going to ask you about Halloween.
I haven't seen it.
Yes.
Yeah. Polarizing movie, but man, oh man, is that thing just overloaded with stuff.
I thought the last one was the end, and now they're doing, I don't know.
Right.
Well, there's so many of them, and
Yeah.
they've retconned out, a lot of them. The last three trilogies that they, or the last three trilogies, the last three that they did, starting in 18, which was Halloween, and they did Halloween Kills, and then they just did Halloween Ends. Those movies retcon out everything other than the first one. But what they did was, to make it interesting, is those three movies like sort of pay homage to the others. And you'll see Halloween 2, the one from 1981 in it, and you'll see stuff from Halloween 3, you'll see stuff from Halloween 4. And I like that because it kind of did give it this sort of Mandela effect type vibe to it, where it was like these alternate realities were bleeding into this one. I very much liked it. The last movie, Halloween Ends, was very, very polarizing because of the lack of Michael Myers in it. That being said, it by far and away has the most going on in it. I mean, if you're into psychology and
like Saw
and Jung, and you're interested in a lot of tarot imagery and just a lot going on in it. I've been working on Halloween Ends. I'm actually working on that now. It feels like I've just been writing on this thing forever. I just seem to not be able to get through it because every time I put it on, it's like, oh, there's something new. Oh, there's something new. Oh, there's something new. Like the gift that keeps on giving. It just never ends. So.
See, for me, Saw is that way. It's a psychological thriller. I don't like slashers, but I like the psychology behind.
Which movie was it?
Saw. All of them. All of them. The psychology behind them are crazy.
I've seen the first one, but it's been years, but I haven't seen any of the sequels.
No, I watched it 1 through 5. I think
the guy who created that follows me on Twitter, almost fell over. I'm like, Oh,
Yeah.
so wow, look at you.
He's
Yeah,
got
very
one
cool.
hell of a twisted mind. That's all I can
Yeah.
say.
So what are you
That is
saying?
one
Will
hell
he
of a
twist people
twisted
follow me on
mind.
Twitter? I don't know.
Seriously, the psychology in that, you have to wonder what happened to him as a child.
Yeah. We have to do a station and sponsor IDs that
Come
time.
on. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
know.
I gotta get
I
my
know.
mouse going here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, kids, you're just tuning in. You're listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 and 107.7 FM, as well as we are live on and in archive, right, Michelle? Roku. So if you have a subscription, make sure to check us out. Tonight we have Robert W. Sullivan with us, and we are discussing cinema and symbolisms. If you're just tuning in now, don't worry about it, because you can stream or listen to our archives on the platform that you normally use. And yes, that's all of them. You can find us on every one that is out there. I believe there's over 200. No excuses. So check us out. Go in there and please make sure to share. We want to give a shout out and a thank you to the amazing people at Folgers Coffee for fully sponsoring our show from day one and for continuing to sponsor our show. We would also like to give a thank you for our intro and outro. Lending his voice and his music, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, award-winning composer and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, and find him on Facebook and Instagram. And you know what comes next when I say that, right? All our regulars know that I'm going to ask you, if you are on YouTube or on Facebook, please give us a like and a follow, and please share. Don't forget.
Thank you. So we did mention if we had some time, and because I know we only have you for another few minutes, 15 minutes or so.
That's fine.
JFK's missing brain, where is it?
I forgot about that. I did mention that to you, that we were going to talk about
You did.
Somebody didn't tell me.
I know, it's a
Okay.
surprise. I want to make sure we had time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's funny you bring this up. And I was actually a couple months ago on a show that I had been a repeat guest on, and somehow or another JFK got brought up, and his brain got brought up, and I said, "Oh, I know where it is. I've known for the last 30 years. It was told to me by a Kennedy insider," and I told the story I'm going to tell you, but it must have kind of spooked the host, because they never had me back on again.
Oh, no way.
And like I said, I'm not gonna mince words or give you a cliffhanger ending. I had a very reliable source who is no longer alive, so I can tell the story. I'm not going to name this person, but this person was a Kennedy insider, and he had connections to the family. And before I tell it, I will point out this is hearsay. I have no personal knowledge of this, but the story that he told me makes a lot of sense. And the story is this. If you do not know, I'll give a little backstory. Don't worry, I will get to the main event. When President Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1963, his body was illegally moved to Bethesda Naval Hospital for an autopsy. The autopsy should have been done by local doctors in Dallas, but it wasn't. It was done by our Army and Navy surgeons in Bethesda, Maryland. And his brain was removed, and it was taken out, and it was essentially evidence, and it could have shown potentially what direction the headshot came from.
Right.
And as crazy as this is going to sound, and this isn't a conspiracy, and this isn't where the brain is now, the evidence from the Kennedy assassination, including the brain, was stored in the National Archives of all places, and it remained there until 1967. And in 2 years after that, if you've ever seen the movie, the Jim Garrison movie with the Oliver Stone movie about Jim Garrison, you will know that Garrison, when he tried Clay Shaw, tried to get access to the brain for the very reason of determining where the headshot came from, and of course,
the trajectory.
Exactly, and he was advised that the brain had gone missing, and no one knew where it was, and no explanation was ever given. The story that was told to me, and I have no reason to disbelieve it, was that in 1967, a lot of people aren't aware of this, that Kennedy's body, John F. Kennedy's body, was actually moved in Arlington National Cemetery to where it is today. It used to be in another place. It was close to where it was moved today. You know, and this is the monument with the flame burning and everything. It was about 5 or 10 feet away, and they moved it closer to being in alignment, under the hill. And they put the torch on it. Well, at any rate, when it was removed, when the body was removed and was moved in Arlington in 1967, the story that I was told was that John F. Kennedy's brother, the former Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, had gotten access to the brain in the National Archives, and had removed it from the National Archives and had buried it and had put it in his brother's coffin. When it was being moved in 1967, and was buried with him when it was reinterred to where it is now. So that was the story that was told to me, is the brain is actually buried with the body now. And of course, I asked, why did he do that? And the story that he told me, this person told me, I should say he or she, doesn't matter, was that Robert F. Kennedy lived in mortal fear of the brain falling into the wrong hands, meaning that he was worried that some sort of circus freak show of some kind would somehow wind up with his brother's brain and put it on display as some sort of macabre, morbid exhibit. It really bothered him, and it scared him to the point of that he wanted it gone. So that in 1967, when JFK's body was moved in Arlington, when his coffin was moved, RFK took the brain from the National Archives and buried it and put it in the coffin where it was reinterred with the body, where it would never be discovered or touched or found again.
That's understandable, though. If he didn't leave it to science, he had every right to be buried with it. And then they were practicing Catholics, so it would have gone against all of their beliefs. At the time. You didn't even have cremation.
Exactly. There is a big thing within Catholicism about going whole to the grave.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have no eyewitness account of this. I have no firsthand knowledge. It is a story that was told to me as a lawyer. I am fully aware that it is what is called hearsay. But the source that told it to me had no reason to lie, and it was a person that I would have trusted to believe. This wasn't someone who was just some crank or anything like that. And I had no reason to doubt the story, and I don't doubt it. I believe it to this day. So a person can, of course, take it for what it's worth. But at any rate, that's where my understanding of where John F. Kennedy's missing brain is located.
It's not something that you can't believe. It's quite believable.
Exactly.
I always wonder, people say, is that family cursed or whatever? And then they'll say, well, the Kennedys will tell you, well, there's so many of us, so there's just more deaths. I'm like, I'm Italian. I come from a huge family, and we have not had the freak accidents that they have had in their lifetime.
They've had some pretty bad luck,
like, come on, it never ends.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, no question. I mean, you had, John F. Kennedy assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy assassinated, Teddy Kennedy with Chappaquiddick. Then you had John F. Kennedy Jr. with the plane crash.
Well,
so yeah, it's definitely
Kennedy hit a murder. He covered up a murder.
It's definitely a family that has had a lot of bad luck, without question.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Makes you wonder about those deals.
Okay, what's this? Dolly. Ooh.
Oh, Robert Kennedy Jr. has declared to run for president. Oh.
Well,
we have that going on in our country. It's not working out so well. So be careful whose name you fall back on.
I know. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. It's been enlightening. Honestly, I love this sort of stuff. And again, it's just something that goes back. I love anything that goes back to ancient history and folklore and civilizations. And, to see this stuff, I actually had no idea how much it was actually surfacing.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, if you're interested in those subject matters, I believe we've agreed to, for June 7th reappearance for me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we'll get into Freemasonry. That goes way, way,
Oh,
way back.
yes, we will. Cannot wait.
Depending on
Can't
who you
wait.
want to listen to. Yeah, I mean, that's a topic that crosses many different areas of the occult and the esoteric, and good grief.
Yes.
Oh, I
Yeah.
can't wait to learn more. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. We're looking forward to it. So people mark your calendars for June the 7th. And we're going to be talking about, actually, can I put the book cover up? Is that all right?
Of course, sure.
Okay, great. Let's just put up the book cover so people, for those of you who may be interested in purchasing the book in advance and reading it, you'll have some time. Here it is, The Royal Arch of Enoch. And this way you'll know exactly what Robert's going to be talking about. So here it is. Believe me, I saw that. I was just, I love this sort of stuff. I really do. And, but also so curious about the cinema symbolism. To me, that was, I had to do it because
Oh, yeah, sure.
it's like, again, I never realized how much it was actually surfacing. So now every time I watch a movie, I'm going to just start training my brain to look for all of this hidden stuff because it's fascinating. I think it makes it that much more interesting.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Michelle. And, that's one of the reasons why I write books on it. I mean, I think it's a fascinating subject matter as well.
Oh, yeah.
I found them. Amazon Canada has them
She
too,
shops
guys.
during a show. She does.
No, and we have him on. I'm making sure he knows what I'm getting from. Are you kidding me?
All the Amazon sites, Amazon England, Amazon Canada, they all carry them. Yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely.
And why wouldn't they? This is fascinating, and you've dedicated so much of your life to it. Thank you.
Oh, it's my
Yeah.
pleasure. Again, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Amelia, for having me on the Outer Realm tonight. And like I said, we'll be back in whatever it is, a month and a half. We'll do this all over again.
Yeah.
We will.
Can't wait.
And so we're going to dig deep. So thank you for joining us. I will email you and I will make sure that you have links to the show and so on.
Okay, great. Yeah. And thank you again for having me on. It was my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Have a good
Pleasure's
night.
ours.
Have a great
Thank you.
weekend.
You too.
Good night. Well, that was interesting to say the least. Like I said, this is all stuff I started researching going back to times when I was really, really researching Jordan Maxwell and getting into a lot of that symbolism. And again, never realized just how much was in there. Really, just fascinating. But it is very cool.
So far back.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of comments that have come in. I'm going to try to put a few of them up. And it's so hard because when a guest is speaking, we really want to give them all kinds of time to do as much talking as they want. We knew we didn't have him the whole time, so it makes it a little bit tougher. Yes, and thank you very much, Chris. Again, it's one of those things that it's not for everybody. And I think some people were expecting a little bit of the more controversial symbolism as opposed to more of an ancient symbolism. It's tough because, guys, if we got too much into everything else, we'd probably get booted off YouTube.
3 volumes.
We just would, It's a curiosity. There's a lot of fascinating information out there. I love esoteric stuff. I really do. So I thought this was great. Now, of course, we're slowly inching over to, where we're going to be slowing down and having to say goodnight. And I do appreciate everybody in chat. It was a really laid back show. Big thank you to Robert Sullivan for joining us. Just really interesting stuff. I can't even wait to see what he does with book 4 because, again, if you just go back and listen to a lot of his interviews, he's done so many, and we really just try to keep it diverse and let our guests go and discuss anything they want to discuss. So it's not the traditional same old sort of questions. And that's sort of, how I like to research them. It's just listening and trying to be a little bit more creative, but he's done so much. So check him out. Anyway, big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring not just tonight's show, but every show they have since day one. And from what I understand, we're continuing our journey again, throughout 2023. So thank you for that. Big thank you to Justin Snicker, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for providing us with your music, your voice, and your time for our intro and outro. We just don't usually, play the outro as much. Again, if you guys want to check us out, you know where to find us, all your favorite platforms. So please like, subscribe, comment, share, you name it, follow. We really appreciate you. It helps us to grow. And I do want to say again, guys, we are, let me go put this up. Where are we? Hold on. Here we go.
Oh, I forgot.
Podcast Awards. We are nominated for the third year. We actually made it to the finals in year 2, but it's an honor just to be considered and nominated. So we are under, I think, Best Female Podcast.
Golly, and
I believe that's what it is. Yeah. Woohoo. So anyway, that's going to be opening up at some point soon as well. And you're going to be seeing all kinds of things coming up on the network as well. So at that point, it'll be a little bit more formal. That'll probably start happening when voting does open. So please vote for a little less. We work so hard to bring you guys some good old entertainment and education every week. But we appreciate you nonetheless. Now, Wednesday night, we basically are welcoming the return of Elliot Van Dusen, who's going to be catching us up on what he's been doing. Now, we've had him on a few times. He is an author and an ex-RCMP officer, which is sort of the United States version of the FBI. And he's basically, working in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology. And he's going to be talking about a really big upcoming event out of Eastern Canada called the Halifax Paranormal Symposium, which is coming on October the 7th, 2023. And I can tell you he's got some fascinating guests, like really fascinating guests. So that's going to be, something that we want to dig our heels into a little bit. So we'll have to check that out.
Who doesn't want to go to Halifax?
And Thursday night, guys, Rebecca Pittman is coming on for the first time. She has authored many books on the hauntings and witch trials of Salem, the hauntings of the Stanley Hotel, Myrtle's Plantation, Lizzie Borden, Lemp Mansion, and the Palace of Versailles. So she's very, very diverse, and just you will have seen her in little clips on television and such. So it's definitely going to be another show you are not going to want to miss. So we're signing off a little bit early tonight, as it is close.
It's there.
It's in Nova Scotia, absolutely.
It's the capital of Nova Scotia.
Yeah, absolutely. So, great to see Amelia back. We're happy she's back. So, but if we did before, well, thank you. I'm sure Folgers would be thrilled to know that as well.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, guys, we're signing off a bit early tonight, and we thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next week. Have a terrific weekend. And be safe out there.